And there's the question Auburn fans have been asking for years, and they have not gotten an answer in the affirmative for very long. Is Auburn football finally, really, for real? Could be, maybe, possibly. There's hope on the plains. Look at that photo from auburntigers.com of the scene on Saturday night in Jordan Hare Stadium. I wasn't there, but the people who were say it was electric. It was a different vibe. And we know that Auburn at night can be a house of horrors for visiting teams. But what they've done with their new light and sound show, the swag surfing at the end of the third quarter, the players were full participants in the party. Of course, the game was well in hand by then. But as if Auburn needed another advantage at home against good teams, they may have just gotten it with another video board in the north end zone to match with the Aubitron in the south end zone. And they're feeling good about themselves. And they should. Why not? They're 2-0. Not everybody in this state can say that. Hey, everyone, I'm Kevin Scarbinsky. This is Scarbo Knows. Before we really get into things today, after the second full weekend of college football, we want to say thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. Whether you're in Birmingham, where they're located, anywhere in the state of Alabama, anywhere across this country, really, if you need family-owned, fee-only financial services, the Rice family has what you need. Check them out. There you see the QR code on the screen. They will take great care of you. And we'll hear a little bit more from them later on in the show. But let's get to it. And how about Saturday? At one point Saturday, the state of Alabama was feeling really good about itself as a football state, as it should, day in and day out, 365 every single year. Jack State had beaten Liberty, which has established itself. We know what Freeze did at Liberty. Troy was beating Clemson 16-0 at one point. And then UAB, of all people, went on the road and they were tied with Navy at halftime. It looked like it could have been one of the greatest days in state of Alabama football bowl subdivision history. Unfortunately, Troy couldn't hang on. Clemson came back to win, and UAB's first half surge didn't hold either, and Navy, as you would expect, washed over the Blazers in the second half. But still, some signs of hope, some, brightness in the clouds that have been UAB football over the last several years. So good things looking up there for the non-SEC FBS teams in the state. But as usual, all eyes are on Auburn and Alabama. They both played night games. And by the way, can I make a request? Who do I need to call? Do I need to call Peter Burns at the SEC Network? Do I need to call Greg Sankey? Do I need to drive downtown about 30 miles from where I live and knock on Greg Sankey's door, or maybe Mark Womack in the SEC office, my friend Herb Vincent, and say, guys, can we do our best not to schedule Auburn and Alabama at the exact same time or very close to the exact same time? So for those of us who would like to watch both the Tide and the Tigers, that we don't have to use the multi-view feature on YouTube TV, that we can watch one game in its entirety, then we can switch over to the other. That would have been nice. We weren't able to do that on Saturday because they were both playing night games. So, of course, Alabama bounced back very strongly, as you might have expected against Louisiana Monroe and Bryant Vincent, our old friend from UAB. An angry Alabama is not what the Warhawks needed to see. And Alabama played about as close to perfect a football game as you could like. 73-0. They scored on every single possession, 10 touchdowns and a field goal, and they shut out the visiting team. Ty Simpson looked like the guy who should be the starter, was the starter, will be the starter. He was perfect, 17 for 17. The backup quarterbacks, Austin Mack, looked good. He's got a cannon for an arm. And then the five-star freshman, Keelan Russell, got everyone excited, a little sneak peek of what they might see from him in the future. Alabama played with more passion, more energy, more intensity, which everyone wanted to see, which we didn't see the first week against Florida State. So things looking up for the Crimson Tide as they get ready for Wisconsin this week. And down on the Plains, they were already feeling great about themselves after the win over Baylor in week 1 in Waco, Texas. And so more good news happened on Saturday, and not just in Auburn. Let's look at a visual representation, if you will, of some of the good news coming out of Auburn football on Saturday. First of all, Auburn itself won 42-3. And this is an amazing stat. They held Ball State. I know it's Ball State. Okay. It's David Letterman's alma mater, isn't it? I think. It's not founded. Ball State was not founded by Lucille Ball. I think that rumor ended up on the internet over the weekend. I can shoot that one down. So they played close to a perfect game, held Ball State to 68 yards of total offense. Think about that for a second. 68 yards. Minus 3 yards in the rushing game. I'm getting a little choked up just thinking about it. That's the best Auburn defensive performance by those numbers, since 1985. How long ago was that? Bo Jackson was a senior. So that was good news. But even before the Auburn game, the early game of the day, if you were like me watching the CW, how the ACC ended up with a television package that included games on the CW, I do not know. I'm glad that YouTube TV has the CW because I got to watch Baylor and SMU play what may have been the most exciting game of the day. Right off the bat, 11 a.m. Central Time kickoff, and it couldn't have gone better for Auburn. Because, and somebody actually asked me this on Twitter as I was putting out thoughts throughout the day on game day, as I always do, engaging with readers and viewers and listeners. And someone actually asked, why does it help Auburn that Baylor beat SMU? Hello? If you are Auburn and you already beat Baylor, you want Baylor to win every single game the rest of the way. Because the better Baylor looks, the better you look for having beaten Baylor. And Baylor went into Dallas and beat a ranked SMU team, an SMU team that reached the playoff last year under former Auburn offensive coordinator Rhett Lashley. And Baylor was able to win that thing. They fell behind. They looked like they might be dead in the water in the second half. They came back. Sawyer Robertson had a huge game. That guy's got almost 1,000 passing yards in 2 games, half of them against Auburn, and he's put up even more against 400 plus again against SMU. So when SMU ended up missing a field goal and Baylor won 48-45, that is a feather in Auburn's cap. That is a boost to Auburn's resume, which is why on Sunday afternoon, for the first time since the week of November 7th, 2021, Auburn is ranked in the AP poll at number 24. That's good news for Auburn. That's a perception that Auburn football is on the right track, that this Auburn team, for the moment, looks like a team that can end this losing streak or streak of losing seasons at 4 and get back into, as Hugh Freeze predicted, the playoff discussion. We're very early, but they're on the right track. However, for every silver lining, there is a dark cloud. For every bit of good news, there's often a bit of bad news. So let's look at the bad news for Auburn. And I know you have to stretch a little bit to find some bad news right now on the Plains, but look at the schedule the next 2 weeks. Now, everybody is looking at September 20th. Auburn at Oklahoma. That game's going to be huge. Jackson Arnold going back to Norman, the program that kicked him to the curb. Oklahoma coming off a huge win over Michigan. And John Mateer, the new quarterback at OU, looking like a Heisman candidate. That game's on at 2:30 on ABC. It was announced today. So that will be one of the bigger games, maybe the biggest game in the country next weekend. But the potential bad news for Auburn is they got to play this weekend. And they have to play one of those games that looks like, well, if you're watching this, that is a trap. That is a very large trap that if you step in it, it will snap your ankle clean off. And you might say, well, South Alabama, how much of a threat could they be for Auburn? Well, if Auburn doesn't have its mind on its business on Saturday morning, and you hate to have morning kickoffs when you're a home team. The road team loves it. The earlier, the better. The home team likes night games. Like I said, the atmosphere in Jordan Hare Stadium from every account on Saturday night with the new video board in the north end zone, the new laser light show, the new and improved sound system. It was, as the kids say, lit. It won't quite be the same in the daylight on Saturday, kicking off at 11:45 a.m. on the SEC network. And when you play an in-state school that is a football bowl subdivision school, but not a member of the Power Four, South Alabama, of course, is in the Sun Belt, that is their Super Bowl. They will come ready to play. The Jaguars gave Tulane all they wanted on Saturday. Came up just a couple of points short. They don't have a long, illustrious history. They've only been playing FBS football for a little more than a decade. They've played 8 games against SEC opponents in that time. They've lost 7 of them, usually by big scores, but they did beat Mississippi State back in 2016. And we know what Mississippi State's atmosphere can be like based on what they did to Arizona State on Saturday night. Kudos to the Bulldogs, and shame on anyone who in 2025 is still making cheap jokes about traveling to Starkville. Whether it's Arizona State coach Kenny Dillingham, or I saw a writer out there, and his name escapes me right now. Might have been David Hale from ESPN. Just cheap shots at Starkville. Have you ever been to a game in Starkville? I have. I've been to many. The 2014 game when Auburn went to Mississippi State, and Mississippi State had a quarterback named Dak Prescott, and Auburn was coming off an SEC championship season, a season in which they came up just short of a national championship, and they were expected to be in contention for another pair of titles, and they went to Starkville, and I still haven't gotten the cowbell ringing out of my ears. And by the way, I'll be right back. We've got to ring one out for the Bulldogs for their big win over Arizona State. This is one of the coolest. I spoke at the Starkville Quarterback Club back in 2016, the year they lost to South Alabama. Manny Diaz was the coach, I think, or he was on the staff. That's one of the coolest gifts I've ever gotten for speaking to a quarterback club. An actual cowbell with my name on it. So appreciate that from the Starkville Quarterback Club, one of my best keepsakes from my long career in this business. So we know what Mississippi State can be. We know the atmosphere there, especially at night. And Arizona State discovered that last Saturday night. So, again, shame on you if you're still taking cheap jokes or making cheap jokes at Starkville's expense. The joke is on you. Mississippi State just beat a ranked team, the defending Big 12 champion. So, what does this all mean for Auburn? While Auburn's riding high, there is a reason to be a little concerned. And as I often do when I'm looking ahead to this Auburn-South Alabama game Saturday, while everyone else is looking ahead to the Auburn-Oklahoma game the following Saturday, when I start to look ahead, I tend to flash back. And I flashed back in this instance to one of the lower moments in Auburn recent history. In 2015, Auburn had opened the season against Louisville, and a guy named Lamar Jackson came off the bench for the Cardinals and gave Will Muschamp and the Auburn defense all kind of fits. But Auburn won the game. Auburn is ranked number 6th in the country. They were about to play Jacksonville State, which at that time was still an FCS program, one of the better FCS programs in the country, but still an FCS program, a lot fewer scholarships, not the same level of talent, certainly, as Auburn in the SEC, especially an Auburn team at that moment that was ranked number 6 in the country. And Jack State went to Auburn. And by the way, if you're looking for coincidence, that was the first game that Auburn played with the Aubitron, as I like to call it, the largest video board in sports at the time in the South End Zone. That was the day they debuted that. And the Aubitron almost went 0-1. Jack State had the lead in the fourth quarter. Auburn had to score late to tie it. They went to overtime. John Gross got far too conservative, the outstanding Jacksonville State coach at the time. Auburn was able to squeak out a victory. And I called it, you see the headline on a column I wrote for AL.com at the time, just call it the most embarrassing victory in Auburn football history. Now, much better to be embarrassed after a W than an L, of course. But that was an indication that something was amiss with that Auburn football team. The very next week, they went to LSU. They were probably looking ahead, just as there's going to be a tendency for this Auburn team to look ahead to Oklahoma and not have its mind on its business Saturday against South Alabama. That Auburn team in 2015, after almost getting upset by Jack State, the very next week, they went to Death Valley and got eviscerated by LSU. Leonard Fournette ran for about 228 on about 19 carries, just left cleat marks all over the Auburn defense. Jeremy Johnson had a nightmare of an afternoon and would end up losing his starting job as the Auburn quarterback. So that's the one thing you don't want to have happen to you if you're Auburn. You have not reached a point as the Auburn football program where you can take anyone lightly. They didn't take Ball State lightly. They put them to sleep early, and they kept them down after they knocked them down. The defense was laying out some incredible licks, just played with a ferocity that you love to see from any defense. Jackson Arnold got to air out the ball a little bit after running so successfully against Baylor. They threw the ball more. You see the weapons they have on the outside. Jackson was a little bit, he wasn't perfectly sharp. The offensive line gave up some sacks. So there are still some concerns. There are still a lot of things to work on if you're Auburn football. And you better take South Alabama seriously, or you might be in jeopardy of repeating history from just 10 years ago. In Auburn, the program, the head coach, Gus Malzahn, everything seemed in better shape then than it has the first 2 years under Hugh Freeze. So I like to play, we love to do this during the NCAA basketball tournament or as we're leading up to Selection Sunday. Who's going to get in? Who shouldn't get in? Who should get in? Let's compare resumes. Let's look at blind resumes. Let's look at 2 blind resumes of SEC coaches, current SEC football coaches. You can figure out pretty quickly, if you're paying attention, you could probably tell who's who before I reveal who they are. But just let's look at these numbers. All right, there's Coach A versus Coach B. Who's on the hot seat now? There were a whole bunch of SEC coaches on the hot seat when this year began. But we're going to focus on 2 categories before we ever kicked off to start this season. Coach A's been on the job in his 4th year. Coach B's in his 3rd year. Coach A's overall record right now at this moment is 20-20. The definition of mediocrity. Coach B is 13-14. He has to win one more game to get to even. Coach A's SEC record is 10-14, not good. Coach B's SEC record is 5-11, even worse. Coach A has 4 ranked wins early in his 4th year on the job. Coach B has 1 early in his 3rd year. And Coach A has 6 unranked losses, the kind of games that will drive your fan base insane. 6 of those early in his 4th year. Coach B also has 6 unranked losses early in his 3rd year on the job in the SEC at his current post. Now, neither of those resumes are going to get you in the Hall of Fame. Neither of those resumes will keep you on the job for the long term. So who are we talking about? Who is Coach A? Who is Coach B? Brendan, can we have the reveal of this big secret, this blind resume? Who's who? Who's on the hot seat now? Of course, the man on the left, Billy Napier. He's on the hot seat now. As much as he was, maybe, or even more so than he was a year ago after that ugly loss to Miami. And Hugh Freeze, of course, is Coach B. He is not on the hot seat at the moment because his team is 2-0 and ranked number 24 in the AP poll. Florida plummeted out of the poll after that ugly loss to South Florida. And that is the overarching point here. It's those ugly losses, those unexpected losses, those unranked losses that will start your boosters talking behind the scenes, talking to reporters, maybe gathering money to help cover a buyout if necessary. And if you look at their 2 resumes, though, before last weekend, Billy Napier, he's got more highs. He's beaten 3 teams. Hugh Freeze has 1 ranked win in his 2+ years at Auburn. Beat number 15 Texas A&M last year. Billy Napier has 4 wins over ranked teams. He's beaten the number 7 team in his first game against Utah in 2022. That seems like a long time ago. He's beaten the number 11 team in Tennessee in 2023. And last year, Ole Miss was number 9 when they went into Gainesville, and Florida beat them and knocked them out of the playoff picture. Hugh Freeze doesn't have a win as good as any of those. And each of those have 6 unranked losses. I mean, look at some of Hugh Freeze's unranked losses. New Mexico State, 31-10 in his first year, 2 years ago. That's the worst loss of either of these guys. Last year, lost to Cal, Arkansas, Vandy. So this thing can turn on a dime. This thing can change so quickly. Your standing with your own fan base can skyrocket or it can plummet over 60 minutes. And I've said this, and look, and everybody says this. Everybody says this about Billy Napier. He seems like a great guy. Seems like he has a great plan to build a program. He's recruited very, very well. Florida has playmakers everywhere you look. And they scored 16 points against South Florida. They gave up 18 points and lost to South Florida. Now, we are not giving South Florida enough credit when we look at it like that. But if you're the University of Florida, you are not supposed to lose to an in-state team that is not in your conference. And Florida doesn't have another SEC team. If you're Auburn and you lose to Alabama, that's one thing. If you're Auburn and you were to lose to an in-state school, which they haven't done in a long, long time, they played a bunch of them. They haven't lost to any of them, and that's why it's important that they be all about their business against South Alabama. You don't want to end that streak. And I noticed someone just mentioned in the press, hire an OC. Who told Billy Napier that he was an elite play caller? I would like to meet the person that convinced him of that. Was it him looking in the mirror? Is that his own inflated sense of self in that regard, in that part of his job? He's not Steve Spurrier. And that's another thing that Billy Napier and Hugh Freeze have in common. They both like to call plays. Hugh Freeze struggled at it his first 2 years at Auburn, but he's got more playmakers now. And you would think Billy Napier, if he is as smart and perceptive as so many people like to paint him, especially at looking at the big picture of how to build a program, you think he would realize that maybe it's time to let someone else call the plays. And yet, at his press conference today, his weekly press conference down in Gainesville, he reiterated he has no plans to give up the play calling duties. This is the definition of insanity playing out within the University of Florida football program. And I tweeted this on Saturday. I've tweeted it before. Billy Napier, the play caller, is going to get Billy Napier, the head coach, fired. Because while Billy Napier is worried about calling plays, he's certainly he's not focusing on clock management, which was horrendous down the stretch against South Florida. And not just down the stretch, into the first half as well. He runs the most boring offense you can imagine. He's got, again, playmakers left and right. Vernell Brown, the third, although he dropped a key pass in that game that gave South Florida a chance to drive down for the winning field goal when Florida could have kept the drive alive and maybe run the clock out, he's going to be fantastic. They've got so many other guys. The running back, Jaden Baugh, he was running all over the Bulls in the first half. Then you had to go look in the witness protection program to find him in the second half. So one decision right there, if Billy Napier would hire, or he's got an offensive coordinator on staff, I guess he doesn't trust him as much as he trusts himself to call the plays. But at this point, staring at what they're staring at going forward, you would think a drastic change were needed. Because if you also look at the games that they've lost, the losses to unranked teams, the losses to ranked teams, the 20 losses in 40 games as the Florida coach, which should not be acceptable to that program, most of them seem to have had the problem primarily on the offensive side of the ball. There have been times they couldn't stop the run earlier in his tenure, but they've corrected that. But it's an offensive problem. And right now, Hugh Freeze looks, I'm not going to say like an offensive genius. I'm going to say he has made improvement in that area from his first 2 years. It helps when you have a quarterback who can run the ball and can throw the ball. And we saw what Jackson Arnold could do in that opener against Baylor when he ran for 137. They focused on throwing the ball more against Ball State. That was a smart strategy. Ball State was not going to beat them. And he made some good throws. The receivers made some plays. But he's got to improve on his accuracy. He will be tested, if not this Saturday against South Alabama, to go against everything I've said up to this point, next Saturday against Oklahoma. Brent Venables is not going to let Jackson Arnold run for 137. I don't think. I think he's going to force him to throw the ball. He's going to force him to find Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, Malcolm Simmons, that great group of wide receivers that Auburn has. But that's next week. If Auburn doesn't have its mind on its business this week, they could go the way of Florida against South Florida. Now, South Alabama is not South Florida. Major Applewhite, the South Alabama coach, is not Alex Golish. South Florida looks like, after beating Boise State and Florida, they look like one of those teams that's going to contend for the group of 6 playoff spot. They're going to contend for the American Conference Championship. And how good does the American Conference look at the top end right now? With Memphis and South Florida and Navy and Tulane. But South Alabama almost took out Tulane on Saturday. So if Auburn stumbles around, if Auburn doesn't have the same passion and intensity at 11:45 in the morning that it had at 6:45 in the evening over the weekend, they might find themselves in a dogfight with the Jaguars. They might find themselves in a 4-quarter game with a team they have no business competing against in the fourth quarter. They should be emptying the bench in the fourth quarter against this team. If Auburn truly really is real, if it's finally true that they've turned the corner, yeah, we'll see it at Oklahoma. But first, we'll see it against South Alabama. And they won't repeat the history of 10 years ago when Jack State came that close to posting the biggest win in school history. And Jack State's a school that's won a national championship at a lower level. But a national championship is a national championship. So we'll find out more about Auburn. We're finding out more about these teams every single week. And that's the joy of college football. There's still a lot we don't know. 11 SEC teams are ranked right now in the AP Top 25. That's never happened before. No conference has ever had 11 teams ranked in 1 week. They won't all stay ranked. That's the mission now for Auburn. You got there. You ended your SEC long drought, the longest in the conference of 56 straight polls without your name in the top 25. Now, can you stay there? Can you move up? Can you move ahead of some other SEC programs? Because of those 11 programs in the SEC that are ranked, Auburn is number 10. So progress, yes. Distance to travel, absolutely. We'll see if Auburn is up to the task. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Kevin Scarbinsky. This is Scarbo Knows. Thank you to Brendan Martin, our executive producer, on the Sidelines.live network. Almost blanked there for a second looking at this beautiful sunny day. And thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. Until next time.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.